Hello and welcome today to this video in which we will discuss the Rafale export contracts, and this time in particular in the Netherlands. A contract from the early 2000s that, at first glance, we could have won, but with the Americans, things never really go as we hope. And for that, we're lucky to have Eve Robbins with us. Hello, what do you know about the Rafale?
I tried to help those who were selling the Rafale for export for 30 years, first with mixed success and then with a bit more luck.
So we're also going to refer you to a first video we made together about the contract in South Korea. France and the Rafale won in South Korea until the Americans intervened. Check out that video. It's a gem. Now let's focus on the Netherlands. So first, when did the Netherlands start to take an interest in replacing their fleet of F-16s?
In 1995, the Dutch Air Force created an office whose mission was to study the replacement of the F-16.
They were already involved with the United States in this replacement effort, since they had bought a lot of F-16s at the time.
Totalement.
It might be a bit of an exaggeration to say it like that, but apart from the JSF, there was no other viable option. By the way, this office, internally, they called it the JSF office.
All right, that already sets the scene.
At the end of 1990, the Netherlands decided to put $10 million on the table for the Americans. In exchange for what? They were entitled to have 2 observers permanently stationed in Washington to follow the development work on the JSF concept. At that time, the F-35 wasn't mentioned yet.
They put money behind one competitor before the competition even started. But why are Americans so established in the Netherlands?
The United States is part of the Netherlands' DNA. You have to understand that the Dutch Air Force since World War II has basically used Lockheed aircraft. They trained on T-33s. When it came to choosing the F-104 starfighter, it was the Netherlands that led other European countries to follow their lead, except for Germany, which is a different case. When 15 years later it was time to replace the starfighters with F-16s, it was the Netherlands that brought Belgium, Denmark, and Norway into the F-16 club and signed this contract of the century. And in the late 1990s into the early 2000s, we were about to witness the same process. That is, a block of European countries that would join the F-35 club.
All right, let's get back to our topic. The United States and the Netherlands had such strong ties that the king even got into some trouble over it. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. In the 1970s, the Dutch royal family, Prince Bernhard, was caught in a corruption scandal involving several million guilders. And it even forced the president of the OQI to resign. The Netherlands used the C-130 Hercules. They used the Apache attack helicopter. The Dutch Navy flew for decades on the Lockheed P, Neptune, and currently they fly on the P-3C Orion. The Hellfire missiles, the JSSM cruise missile, are made by Lockheed, and their air defense missiles include the Patriot, which is made by Lockheed. This is Lockheed Air Force.
But still, by having such close ties with the Americans, do they try to pretend that they're going to have a contract, an open competition, or does it seem rigged from the start?
Well, we can't really say that it seems rigged. We strongly suspected that the Netherlands had a very strong leaning toward the F-35, but on the other hand, we couldn't show open disrespect toward the Netherlands in their search for a successor to the F-16. Why couldn't we? First, because it was the key to the other European countries. There was a big risk, and that risk turned out to be true, since that's what happened, that Belgium, Denmark, and Norway would switch in the same way as the Netherlands and follow the Netherlands. Then, how do you expect to talk about European defense within the European Council if when the Netherlands wants to make a major investment in defense, we don't even offer them a European alternative? It's not possible. Then there is still an entire policy of cooperation between the French armed forces and the armed forces of other European countries, including the Dutch, which made it impossible to refuse to answer information requests from the Netherlands. It wasn't possible.
So, in 2002 they launched this procurement competition. Technically, is this something that really allows for a concrete evaluation of the effectiveness of the different competitors?
So yes, it was a procurement competition that was done intelligently. It was a multi-criteria procurement competition, really projecting towards 2030, 2035, taking into account future threats, which included 700 questions that had to be answered, with maybe a slightly excessive weight given to this fantasy of stealth, which was on the mind of the Dutch Air Force. But it's a procurement competition and a questionnaire to which, in the end, the Rafale responded well. We did very, very well since we were rated just a tiny bit behind the F-35. And in the end, we can say that among the existing aircraft, the Rafale came out first in this evaluation. The one that came ahead was an aircraft that only existed on paper, on the drawing board, and at the time there was only one platform, one airframe in flight, but without any weapon system.
So now, indeed, on the screen we're going to show the results in this evaluation table. We can see that the Rafale in the F3 configuration is 0.02 points below the theoretical F-35. But on the other hand, there's the Rafale in the F4 standard, which is well above the F-35. Why wasn't it taken into account to finally say that the Rafale was the winner?
Because at the time, you have to understand that we didn't know what the F4 standard would be.
We didn't know about the F-35 either.
No, but the Americans are very good at making people believe that we know what it will be.
Exactly. And so, moreover, if we take a step back, we know today, with a few decades of hindsight, that the Rafale, in the F3 and F4 standards, it is ultimately superior to what had been anticipated, since it benefited from good sales to develop additional technologies. Whereas the F-35, very officially, had its ambitions scaled back, yet still ended up more expensive and, incidentally, behind schedule.
Yes, of course. Since originally out of 107 F-16s to be replaced, the Dutch in 1995 hoped to acquire 87 F-35s, and in the end they were only able to acquire 37 F-35s because of their budget.
But then, this evaluation, won by the F-35 by just 0.02 points, is that what allowed the Dutch to enter into this contract and sign it?
No, it's much more complicated than that. First, you have to be aware of the drama unfolding in the background within the Dutch aerospace industry. In 1996, Fokker, the leading Dutch aerospace institution, went bankrupt. Fokker is the soul of Dutch aviation. During World War I, thousands of Fokker planes flew in the German Air Force. By the way, the Red Baron von Richthofen, he flew a Fokker triplane. Fokker produced hundreds and hundreds of planes between the two wars, and then after the Second World War, they released two absolutely excellent planes that flew all over the world, which were the F-27 Friendship and the F-28 Fellowship, with real success. Unfortunately, due to management problems, they went bankrupt in 1996, and that's nearly 10,000 people whose jobs were at risk and who could have ended up out of work. It was urgent to secure enough work for Fokker. First of all, the Dutch government put several $100 million into the company to try to keep it alive, and came up with a subcontracting policy for Fokker. And this policy that he came up with was one he hoped would be politically balanced. To Europe, they gave a civil subcontract, and Fokker, taken over by Stork, since Fokker was no longer called Fokker, it was called Stork at that time. Stork would produce components for the Airbus A380. And then on the military side, to maintain political balance, they would go with American military equipment, and in their minds it could only be the F-35.
But didn't France, with the Rafale, offer a workload plan that would have allowed continued work on a European project?
So first of all, they were already involved in this pro-American process. But that being said, it's true that France made a particularly attractive and interesting offer to the Netherlands. It was a proposal that was very balanced regarding the research and development aspect and the production aspect. It was a proposal that brought together the Dutch Air Force and the French Air Force, first from an operational point of view, then from a training point of view. And then we said to the Dutch Air Force, let's work together, the French Air Force and the Dutch Air Force, to define what the future standard of the Rafale would be, that is the F4.
Strategic integration, a role in the design office, what was that?
So from the design office side, it was particularly interesting since we were offering them several things. First of all, of course, to be involved in the development of the F4 standard. Secondly, they were entrusted with the entire development and testing of a new version of the Rafale, which was the two-seater naval version. At the time, the French Navy wanted to have a two-seater on board the aircraft carrier. And developing this version was not at all just about adding a second rear seat to a single-seat Rafale. It's much more complex, much more complicated than that, and it really required in-depth work for the design office at Fokker, or Stork at the time. Alongside that, SNECMA was making proposals to the Dutch engine industry, to Avio Daipen, and so on, to involve them in the development of a future version of the M88 and to work on the GP7000, which was going to equip the 400 EME cell. And Thales was offering them the chance to really get into the core parts of the Rafale's onboard electronics. They were offering them the chance to cooperate on the development of the active antenna for the electronically scanned radar that was going to equip the Rafale.
Through Thales Netherlands.
Via Thales Netherlands and Philips.
So here, it's still got a pretty attractive package.
It's a great package indeed, yes.
Technologically, they refuse to look at the Rafale F4 because they want to claim that the F-35 is better.
Industrially, they don't rule it out. Yes, they ignore it.
They ignore it. Yes, that's almost worse. Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Industrially, they feel that the Americans are perhaps more generous.
So, the argument they use repeatedly is that the Americans are promising us nearly 5,000 units
Of the F-35.
of the F-35. Whereas, at best, we will sell 700 or 800 Rafales on the export market over the next 30 years. Which is better? Manufacturing 5,000 landing gear doors multiplied by 2, that's 10,000 landing gear doors for the F-35 with wiring and other components. Or manufacturing 700 Rafale fuselage sections. Rafales. In absolute terms, it can be calculated.
With some perspective, it's also a poor calculation.
It was probably a bad calculation.
Was there also an issue? It's that the Netherlands, alongside Belgium, Italy, Germany, and Turkey, are countries that host the American atomic bomb. The American atomic bomb, which used to be integrated on a British-German aircraft. This means the bomb could eventually be used on non-American aircraft. Was it possible or even considered for the Rafale to carry the American atomic bomb for the benefit of the Netherlands, Belgium, and others?
Technically, anything is possible. Politically, that's another issue. That's a matter for negotiation between the states. I think the subject has never been brought up between France and the United States, since France has never needed to address this issue. It's a great mystery of this competition in the Netherlands. The issue of the atomic bomb of the B-6112 has never been brought up. The Dutch political parties, and it's very curious because among the opponents of the F-35, since there were some in Dutch political life, basically we can say that, broadly speaking, the left-wing parties in the Dutch parliament were opposed to the F-35. Not because they wanted a European solution, they didn't care at all, but because they felt that the F-35 was far too expensive for the Dutch budget, and that all that money would be better spent on social policy or something else. But all those left-wing parties were known for their opposition to a nuclear policy in the Netherlands, to nuclear energy, to nuclear power. And yet there was never any debate in Dutch political life during those years about the existence of those 15 tactical atomic bombs. 15? That's all? Yes, there are. 15. There are 11 at the Volkel base. There are 11 in Gareth, and each one is equipped with a special shelter called WS-3. Each of these shelters can hold up to 4 nuclear bombs, but currently, according to the information we have, there are a total of 15. And that's enough, by the way.
Anyway, I'm not sure Donald Trump would let us use them if needed.
Probably not.
Given our partnerships at the moment?
That's another question.
Well, the conclusion is that once again, no matter how well we perform, as soon as there's American pressure, we can't do anything. By the way, you mentioned Norway earlier. Norway, WikiLeaks proved that the Norwegians wanted to buy the Gripen, and it was due to diplomatic pressure that they had to buy the F-35, which they didn't want.
Absolutely, but we've seen this kind of diplomatic pressure in the Netherlands as well. The role of the U.S. ambassador to the EU was very important. Everyone knows today that the U.S. ambassador told the president of a political party, the PVDA, that he should not take certain political positions, that it would be very bad for his political future within the party. This ambassador made his views known on several occasions to the Minister of Defense, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, telling them that postponing a decision on the F-35 would be taken as a very offensive decision by the United States. The pressure was very strong, it was very real, because this process lasted a very long time. And the hesitations, they weren't on the side of the military, they weren't on the side of the industry, they were on the side of the politicians. There is a number you need to keep in mind. Throughout the entire political process, nearly 20 years, there were more than 4,000 written questions asked by Dutch parliamentarians to the Dutch executive. Just the work of written questions and answers has been valued at a cost of 15 million euros in time and work done by Dutch civil servants for their responses.
Well, and incidentally, the Dutch executive who chose the F-35 is doing quite well since the Prime Minister became the head of NATO. That's still pretty good.
Absolutely.
There have been relationships like that, and he's not the only one, because if you look at the history of the different political leaders of NATO in Europe, they're all people who chose the F-35 just before. Quite a coincidence, though. Coincidence, oh yes. Yves, thank you very much. By the way, I want to thank Alta Aresk, the CIA's agent, for inviting us and for welcoming us here today. And you also write, or rather, you have a publishing house where there's the series about Lockheed. So, the Lockheed, between the version with almost vertical takeoff and landing to land in stadiums, the one that lands on aircraft carriers, the one that puts out fires, and the one that goes towards the hovercraft version. And the latest version even includes the newest developments, the losses in Iran. There you go, the current war. It's super up to date. We'll give you all the links. It's really funny, very interesting and well documented, with stories about special forces from everywhere. It's a great collection. Yves, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it and see you soon.